we all know the U.S. economy is in bad shape, and for a measure of how bad it's gotten, check this out. Joe Biden doesn't even know how to pronounce the word economy or the word for those who study it, economist, anymore.
7 Nobel laureates in the economy, on the economists, and the economics, I should say.
Economicicts.
Your guess is as good as mine there, really. He's also not too clear, old Joe Biden, on what his job and role is in all of this.
You know, I know most families are focused on just putting 3 meals on the table, taking care of their kids and paying their bills. Helping you do that is my job. That's a president's job as well.
Okay, hang on, Mr. President. If it's your job and it's the president's job as well, then kind of, I don't know, got this question in my head. Who's actually the president? But anyway, it all gets worse because asked when America's runaway inflation will come down by reporters there, he didn't have much of an answer for that either.
President, when do you think inflation will come down given today's jobs number?
Yep, just take a seat there like you're just riding on the bus there, old Joe. Those were some highlights from Joe Biden talking about the listen, Jack, the money thing. Actually, he was signing a bill to act on COVID-19 fraud, though that legislation still leaves Fauci walking the streets. Go figure, yesterday in Washington. But if you want a real measure of how the U.S. economy is going and just how far the country is from recovery, don't just look at the figures. Instead, look at the media and how they're trying to still cover for him. A great example of this came in last month in where else? Well, the New York Times, the once great newspaper that has lately found a market playing on the neuroses of angry, overprivileged suburbanites with "In this house we believe in science" yard signs on their front lawns. As if to do the spade work for permanent recession and gray socialist misery, they presented this interview, the New York Times did, with left-wing economist Herman Daly under the headline, "This pioneering economist says our obsession with growth must end." It was all full of the usual nonsense about capitalism killing the planet, forgetting, of course, the ecological utopia that was the old Soviet Union. But it was very much of a piece with other New York Times anti-growth propaganda, such as this piece, which suggested one great side effect of inflation would be that it would drive more people to stop eating meat. But this leftist campaign to turn cheeseburgers into the new cigarettes is just a sideshow to the main game, which is to use magician-like distraction tricks to convince people that no, the lousy economy isn't real. It's just a vibe, man. Meet Kyla Scanlon, a 20-something economics influencer. Yes, there is such a thing, who has been given space in the New York Times to tell us that the recession is all in Americans' heads. Gaslighting much? The New York Times has given Scanlon space to claim that America is in a vibe session, joining the cavalcade of recession deniers who say that a recession actually no longer means 2 consecutive quarters of economic shrinkage. Who knows, maybe it was in a pool. Scanlon writes, "There is no recession yet. Right now we are in a vibe session of sorts, a period of declining expectations that people are feeling on both real-world worries and past experiences," unquote.
Now let's talk about this economist who was fact-checked. We talked earlier about the recession. This guy, James, is fact-checked for stating that the US is in a recession. It is, isn't it?
Well, it is by the definition of a recession used by just about everybody since forever, which is 2 quarters of consecutive economic decline. But this economist, Philip Morgan, I think his name is, from the American Institute for Economic Research, he posted this. He's an economist. He's not some yahoo on Facebook. And guess what? He copped a Facebook fact check along with all the warnings. If you continue to spread misinformation, blah, blah, blah. But this was a piece.
So some idiot at Facebook with a thing up.
But Rowan, it's much more sinister than that. It's much more sinister than that because while you were away, also, Wikipedia had to lock the recession definition page on Wikipedia.
What?
Google
after they changed it to fit the White House definition.
And Google was putting up, little warnings. this story is changing rapidly. Little warnings, which is, of course, what they always say when this goes against the narrative. Because the Daily Telegraph this week reported that there was a push-on by who else but the New South Wales Teachers Federation, another fantastic union doing so much for Australia, to include books with radical gender theory in them, including all sorts of stuff like intersex identity, gender diversity, and all of this in English and in the health and development classes. Now, this is where the story gets interesting, because the education minister, Sarah Mitchell, who has said, well, we're not going to do that. She's actually stuck up for a bit of common sense on this. But I have to say, this is the same Sarah Mitchell who a few weeks ago, when there was an after-school care center in Roseville in the northern suburbs of Sydney that had this whole wall of gender identities, about polyamory and intersex and all sorts of stuff. You missed a lot of stuff while you were away, Rowan. It was great. But, I went to her office directly, and she wouldn't condemn this. So, I think that she's understood now, finally, that there's a bit of community concern about this sort of thing. But the New South Wales government has been really nowhere on so much of this. As standards have declined, all of this woke nonsense has been inserted into the classroom.
But look, there has been an urgency from this president from day one when the Supreme Court made this extreme decision to take away a constitutional right. It was an unconstitutional action by them, a right that was around for almost 50 years.
Unconstitutional! Did you hear that? So what the Supreme Court does when they make a decision, if Karine Jean-Pierre doesn't like it, it's unconstitutional. This is, of course, the way the left always thinks, that they make the law, and anything that goes against what they think is somehow illegal. But there's a really interesting point, because the subtext, Rowan and Rita, is that the progressive left is furious with the Biden White House because they don't think they pushed back enough against that decision after it was handed down. And that is part of the reason why you're seeing a lot of disaffection and a lot of stories of people saying, I think the old man's losing it. I don't think he's got it in him. I don't think he should run again. I'm not sure he should stick around next week. Back in 2016, the tourism industry was warning, and the environmentalists were warning, that there would be a hit of $1 billion to the Australian economy because people wouldn't come and see the reefs and they wouldn't see the coral. Wouldn't this be a great time and a great excuse, with the world opening back up after the pandemic, for the Albanese government to tell Tourism Australia, hey, come on down to Australia, come see the reef, everything's fine?
Precisely. Where is our government? Where is our state government sending this news out and saying our reef is the best it's ever been since we've been able to start measuring it? Instead, what we have is companies like Google and Coles, putting aside huge amount of funds to save the reef. But of course, every time that these virtue signalers do that, they're actually sending out the signal, the reef is doomed, the reef is terrible, and you should just talk to some of the tourist operators up around Cairns. Every time it happens, they just put their hands in their head in their hands and go, what can we do right here? The reef is wonderful, but everybody's running down our premier tourist industry. It's crazy.
Lawrence, Harry was just talking about old school policing, but what about the overall silent majority of Britons who see that over 3 years, in half the neighborhoods in Britain, the UK police were unable to solve a single burglary, and yet they've been, going around busting people for posting memes that they didn't like. Do you get the sense that the tide is turning and that the silent majority are now making their own voice clear, and the politicians and the bureaucrats in the police forces are responding to these outrages?
I do. I have a feeling that what the silent majority need is the tip to a spear, right? So I think what Harry and I are doing, and what everyone is doing in the Bad Law Project, and I encourage you to visit our website at badlawproject.com, is to go, we're going to provide you the tip of the spear. Harry's been through this, the process being the punishment, over a long period of time. So it's very sensitive to him in terms of the police. And for me, I'm concerned about all of our foundational institutions. But what's so great is we're now able, because the someone somewhere in Britain doesn't want us to exist. So they're really trying to stop us having a bank account and all the things. So we've created this uncancelable platform where any ordinary citizen who has a problem can come to us, and we can come and literally change police procedure in a week. And that is what's so motivating. And it's more powerful than anything that one can do politically.